Hello and welcome to the moon once again. I'm here today with Andrea, also from the mymun team. I'm Alex, by the way. Hi, Andrea. And we have an exciting topic that we thought we would discuss today. That being, what are the biggest mistakes that organizers should avoid when organizing a conference? Andrea, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Alex. I'm super excited to be here. First time in the podcast, and it's a great privilege. I'm very happy.
Oh, it's a privilege for us as well because you have organized conferences before, especially I think with, you call it NESMUN, you write it NHSMUN, but it's not in the UK. It's in Mexico and in the US, isn't it?
Yes, it is. NESMUN takes place in New York City, and there's a second version that happens in Mexico. But the big organization that actually organizes the conference, it's called mymun. And I have been working for them for the past 3 years. So I pretty much know what to do, what not to do when it comes to organizing conferences.
Awesome. And I've also seen my fair share of conferences being organized. I've organized a fair share of conferences myself as well. And obviously at mymun, we are in contact with a bunch of organizers every day about how their organization is going, what problems they might have, and also at the end of conferences, what learnings they get back. So it's always interesting to see those reviews, to talk to people what went well, what didn't. And I think today we're going to run through a few of those that we both noted. First off, we have a few that really stuck out to you, and I want to start with this one here. Poor feedback and evaluation. What's up with that?
Well, I think everyone should learn from past mistakes. So This is a big thing that many conferences forget, and it's really vital. You need to gather feedback from delegates, from faculty advisors, even from your staff, to know what really happened during the conference, what things you can look forward to in the next conference, what you should fix, and apply it really to your next iteration. You should gather all that feedback, all the comments, and really do a little report. You can even do a little document where you can highlight the specific mistakes or the specific things you learned from that iteration, and then you transmit it to the next board of organizers, so they can apply those lessons learned to the next conference.
Yeah, I think this is so important, and especially not just collecting the feedback, but really learning from it. And this is something I see, I think almost every conference, collecting feedback is important. And they end up collecting feedback, but then passing it on to those people who do it next year and really learning from those mistakes, I think is a challenge. What you're suggesting, I think, to create a little feedback report. I know it's a bit of extra work after the conference, but I think that can be so vital in passing it on to that next generation, right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it doesn't have to be a long, extensive report. It just can be simple document where you really just highlight those specific mistakes that you noticed during the conference. And it's really important not only to gather feedback from delegates, but you also have to gather feedback from your chairs, from the people that worked in the conference, because they're the ones in the action too. And they are the ones that will eventually keep working in the conference too, if they're in the, status of, I don't know, assistant director at the time, or chairs that will to move on forward. They're the ones who are going to carry that legacy, and they need to be taken into account too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, so one of the things, this is not supposed to be a whole conversation just about how mymun fixes everything. But because we have a lot of people listening who do use mymun, I do want to highlight how maybe you can use mymun to make that a little bit easier for you guys as well. Since after every conference, we ask feedback from every participant of your conference. So that will be registered within your conference, and you can still collect your own feedback if you want to have more in-depth questions and things like that. But just to transfer that knowledge onto next year, you can make sure that whenever you do that handover right to the next generation, you make sure you add them to your old conference and mymun as well. So they have access to all that feedback there, and they can go and scroll through that and all those things. And you can get feedback there from, all the participants who left the feedback for you. the year before. So that can be really valuable. And one thing this now inspired me actually to think about is to, what you, Andrea, said, to have those summaries, to actually just use some AI language model to create a summary of the feedback in mymun, because I don't know, if you have a large conference with thousands of delegates, it can be hard to go through all that feedback individually and to summarize that. Whereas if we just connect to the ChatGPT API, for example, I think that could be making it very easy for people to stay on top of that and really have like a executive summary.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, technology is our friend. We should use it for our advantage. And I totally agree. Like, many conferences have many delegates, many feedback, you can even do a Google Forms with the questions you want to ask about the feedback, but also collecting all of that can be a burden. So totally, like, AI can help us with that task.
I think this is actually really interesting, especially if you have a larger conference and you wanna. I remember going through a feedback session with the society, and it took hours and hours on a day after, because you go through essentially every feedback, and it's difficult 100%. To do that, especially the larger conferences. The larger the conferences get, and if you only collect feedback, for example, at larger conferences, you have those faculty advisor meetings, right, during the conference. They're not necessarily representative of the problems people actually have at your conference. So finding a better way to collect that feedback efficiently, I think it's maybe an interesting avenue for us to dive into in the future. But
100%.
Next, I wanna dive into this point, because I think one of the interesting things and cool things about being a conference organizer, right, is that adrenaline feeling at the conference. When it's going down, and whatever event you plan, things are gonna go wrong. But then how do you manage that, and how do you make sure that whenever things go wrong, you're not going to have an absolute disastrous experience? How can we manage that? You have this point here: insufficient crisis management.
Yeah, a big situation that happens in conferences is that we don't prepare enough for those mistakes, for those little, like, what can go wrong during the conference, in committee, outside committee, et cetera. So something that we need to do before the conference is actually crisis management, like plans that we don't have to develop a bunch of situations. We just have to develop those situations that might actually happen during the conference, and develop a management system and provide training to chairs, crisis staff, and establish clear protocols for handling crisis during the conference. And this crisis can be anything at all. It can be a delegate fainting. Who do we call? Who do we call when a delegate faints?
Hey, Mr. Policeman.
Yeah, I mean, the ambulance. I don't know. Who do we call? Who do we record to when we need someone to fix a computer, or to bring us more chairs, or to bring us more paper or pencils, or like whatever a delegate or a chair might need. So little crises might happen, and we need to set leaders, or just plans, so we don't
clear responsibilities.
Exactly.
I think this is really important, and setting those clear responsibilities within your teams is one thing, and really obviously something that's very important. But on the other hand, also communicating that, especially to delegates. And I've seen this done really well at the conference Camon in Germany last year, where they had on the backs of the badges the various sort of contact persons listed very clearly with their phone numbers and other contact methods as well. And they communicated that also during the opening ceremony. And what they actually also had was safe persons. So essentially, if you ever felt unsafe during the conference, we talked about it, or Jazz talked about it to Sarah Luna at a different podcast, about especially, girls sometimes feeling uncomfortable with gossip boxes and things like that.
Right.
Where there is a person who people can turn to in a moment where they do feel unsafe, and have those people really accessible. So absolutely important point. So putting the procedures in place, but then also communicating very clearly to everybody, hey, reach out. We always have an opening for you.
100%.
This next one, I think, since we are on the topic of communication and sharing things with participants and delegates, inadequate pre-conference communication. This is one that I see the amount of delegates who are lost before a conference and then contact us at mymun and be like, oh, where is it happening? What the hell, help? What's going on with that?
Yeah, I mean, there's not even delegates, like delegates, chairs, your own staff that need like communication constantly. You need to know what's going on before the conference, during the conference too. You need to provide clear instructions, update important information to delegates before the conference. And this can lead to confusion and lack of like preparedness. You need to establish clear channels of communication. For example, you need to set for example, Slack. The whole staff communicates through Slack, but also, for example, on MUN Command, we have a little chat icon where you can communicate everything with like the whole conference. You can communicate with a specific delegate, with chairs, with your staff. But this needs to happen because, for example, I had a case where I wasn't really aware that there was a time, like a scheduling situation happening, and delegates wanted to leave the committee session. And I wasn't aware that the committee session ended because I had an old schedule. So delegates were raising point of order, point of parliamentary inquiry, everything they could do to stop the committee session. I want to go, I want to eat, and I wasn't aware what was going on. I was super strict back then.
Very fair.
I was super strict back then, and I didn't want them to leave. I wanted to finish the committee session. I had like delegates still on moderated caucuses, like the list. And then I got into big trouble because I didn't get that schedule in time, the updated schedule.
And you get into trouble for it. It's all your fault.
I know. So that's just one example of what can or might happen in your conference too. So you need to communicate with every single person that takes part in your conference.
Yeah. And I think this is something where, I mean, it's difficult, but the lesser points of failure, I want to say, you have, the better sometimes, where we call it, the single source of truth, right? So if there's only one schedule that everybody's looking at and always referring to, then you make an adjustment to the schedule because it's dynamic in some degree, hopefully, online. Then everybody will always have the same version. Whereas if you print it in one brochure and another one, and you put it hard-coded into your website and you put it elsewhere, then there's just by human error, one of them is going to be wrong. Not even mentioning if you have to change one, it's going to be a nightmare to change it. And again, like MUN command kind of helps there because it helps you at least during your conference to have one single source of truth schedule, which is aligned for everybody. But again, this is maybe not ideal for communication before the conference. But maybe we can in the future integrate something there on mymun. But I think one of the points that you mentioned there is really great as a takeaway to think about it very clearly in terms of before the conference, what do I have to communicate? A, to the chairs, B, to your staff, and C, to the faculty advisors and delegates. And to make this, to really write it down very clearly, be it on a whiteboard, flip chart, Notion file, Google Docs, I don't care. But write it down very clearly and also make a timeline of when you have to communicate what.
100%.
And I think this is literally something, it's going to take you half an hour, half a year before your conference or a year before your conference, whenever you start planning. But once you have that document to hold on to, I think it's just going to make your life so much easier, no?
Yeah, and also your staff's lives, your delegates' lives, your chairs' lives too, because they will be updated with everything that's going on in the conference. You can even do a little checklist on your notebook, on a paper, but you need to have like a clear plan, like a clear communication plan for each section of, people that are going to your conference.
I mean, I'm dreaming of like a big Notion template for that, where you have like a table of essentially the tasks already predefined, and you can put in your own dates. You're going to get reminders to help facilitate that. One of the things I want to maybe also again mention for the mymun users as well is that in the participant list, you have this beautiful email feature where you can essentially email everybody within your conference or apply a filter and only, send that email out to a select group of people. But it means that keeping everybody up to date or the respective groups up to date is really, really easy. I know from experience when you have to copy paste emails out of a spreadsheet into Outlook and then try to send mass mails to your participants, it's horrible because the copy pasting never goes well and you always have to correct things manually. So obviously at that point, when it's so hard to send information, you're going to send less of it. So again, for the mymun users, the email feature in the conference in a participant list, absolute gold. And what you can also do on mymun and on MEN command actually is uploading your key conference documents. And I think this is another thing, sometimes those documents might be hard to find or inaccessible on your conference website. And I know it can be hard designing navigations on websites or building websites for conferences in general. But that's again why mymun gives you that opportunity to upload those documents for your committees or for your conference as a whole in one central place where everybody will know where to find it, because they will have to look at their application anyways, and right in the context of that, they will see all those important documents and they will know where to find it from the previous conferences too. So again, it makes just that life of your delegates that much easier.
Yeah, and it's super accessible for everyone. And delegates will be updated with everything, which is awesome.
I'm starting to feel like one of those people selling stuff on TV because I'm talking about this mymun feature so much. Maybe we should.
Yeah, we should move on.
Buy this shredder which shreds your apple in 5 seconds. No, it's not that, but I don't know. It just makes your life as an organizer so much easier. And yes, you still have to think about when do I have to send what, because look, realistically, we can't tell you when you have to do it because every conference has its own schedule. But we give you the tools to make it such that once you thought about it, you can just do it like this. Now, we talked about the delegates having a poor experience by not having a schedule, by not being informed, by all sorts of things. Inadequate delegate engagement is one that you wrote down as well.
Well, this can be understood in two ways. First, I think many people regard MUN conferences as like very, nerdy, strict, educational, whatever. But MUN conferences can be so much more. You can have activities, you can have workshops, social events, and it can be, more engaging for delegates, more memorable. They can create memories between each other, connections outside, committees. Because sometimes you want to interact with people in, SOCUM, and you're in ECOSOC, you know what I mean? So this opportunities can give delegates that little spark, that little, memorable experience that, will make them want to come the next year and the next year. Mm-hmm. And they will remember your conference as this, like, of course, great conference in the sense as great debate, great chairs, but also great experience overall. And I think you mentioned a book, The Power of Moments.
Yes. This is actually something. So when we talked beforehand, this is one of my all-time favorite books, because if you want to provide an extraordinary conference experience, you have to, especially, if you look at mymun now, there's 400 or 500 conferences which are coming up over the course of the next year, let's say, that we have registered. So people have abundant amounts of choice. So you have to try to stand out. And so this book, Power of Moments, it talks about how you can make an experience feel truly special afterwards. And it doesn't mean that everything about your conference has to be picture perfect. And it doesn't mean that you have to spend enormous amounts of money. It talks about, for example, a trip to Disneyland, right? Which, objectively speaking, it can be horrible, right? You have to stand in queues all day. It might be warm, it might be sweaty. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of noise, dear me. You might get lost. I don't know. I've never been to Disneyland. I've been to Europa Park because I'm a German. But I imagine it's similar. But what you talk about is that when you then have that one moment where your child is taking a picture with Mickey Mouse, and you're going to have that for the rest of your life, or you have that one euphoric moment on a roller coaster. Those moments stick up so much that that's what's going to be stuck in your memory. And the guys in the book, The Power of Moments, they explain it much better, this concept. But it really can help you think about, okay, what are going to be those moments during my conference? What little thing am I going to have at my opening ceremony, maybe, which is going to make it stand out a little bit? Is there going to be that one special guest speaker that everybody can take a picture with? Or is everybody going to get a chance to speak? Or, for example, for me, one of my most memorable MUN moments was delivering a speech at the GA, at the opening ceremony, essentially, to the whole conference.
Me too.
And that was really special for me. Yeah. So this is really special. Obviously, it doesn't...
I saw Selena Gomez in my closing conference, like a closing ceremony. Wow. I know. Wow. And I got to speak in the GA too in New York, which is something that, really, really marked me. It was awesome. It was awesome. And that's why I wanted to go year after year. It left me, even if I cried after the committee session because I was overwhelmed. It was literally the first time in MUN, like doing MUNs. This specific event or moment literally made me forget about everything bad that happened before and made me want to come back to the conference year after year.
There you go.
Also, when we talk about delegate engagement, we not only, refer to the social event or the, activities or workshops or, guest speakers or whatever. We also talk about inside the committee, like how you can engage as a chair all the delegates that are present in your committee. And this is something that we don't want to sound too salesy, but MUN Command can also help with that. Engaging in committee is so important because delegates need to feel included. Delegates need to feel that they know what's going on inside the committee in order to participate and to have confidence to stand up and make a speech or even make a motion. What do you think, Alex?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think this is why part of the reason why we built MUN Command, because you have those people in the back maybe who have a hard time keeping track of debate. Frankly, you don't have to sit far in the back if it's just the chair is reading down the 3 motions that are on the floor at the moment. And who does know that moment where you listen to the second motion he's mentioning, or she, and then you don't even remember what the first one was about anymore, and you have to ask them to repeat. And, all those delegates who maybe aren't super engaged anyway because it's their first time, they're a bit scared, they're going to be lost and gone. And this is where MUN Command comes in, and where the big value is that everybody can just look on their personal device, their laptop, their phone, their iPad, whatever it may be, and just see, oh, we're in the GSL. This is the next speaker. Oh, I'm speaking. Oh, cool. Oh, those are the motions on the floor, exactly. This is what I'm going to vote for. And it's so easy, even if you drift off for a second, and realistically, everybody will. Look on their phone, check what their mom texted them or their crush at the conference. And you just swipe your head back and you see, this is exactly what's going on, and you're not lost. And that just allows so many more people at your conference to have this unbelievable experience that they will remember for the rest of their lives.
Exactly.
The next up is, and I think this is an interesting one, is a hot one, because many conferences I know struggle with this: logistics. Failure to address logistical considerations is what you wrote down. That sounds like an operative clause.
Yes, no. It sounds very formal, but it's so essential, especially with even small and big conferences. We all know that we use computers to track down the speeches for those who don't use MUN Command or other types of platform. And also you use maybe projectors, or it's not even technologically focused, but it could also be the chairs. It can also be the room arrangement, the seating plans, the 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 audiovisual equipment. This needs to be planned ahead. Imagine if a delegate comes into a committee and he doesn't find a chair to sit on. This will take you 10 minutes out of your committee time to find a chair to for the delegate to sit down. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
this needs to be like addressed beforehand, so you don't waste any time of the committee, but also you don't make that mistake of making the delegate maybe uncomfortable, or the whole committee stop because of this. Maybe there's your computer broke down. You need to have a backup computer or a backup plan for when those situations happen. And you need to start planning early, and maybe do a checklist even per committee. You need, I mean, for example, SOCIUM needs, I don't know, 20 chairs and 2 computers, and you have to have a backup. You need to have a backup plan or backup computer, backup situation, so you can address it right away and not lose any time, valuable time of your committee or overall conference.
Yeah, I love that. And I think just this idea, because you've been to a bunch of conferences, you've maybe organized a few, but when you're finally in charge, it's easy to think, it's a conference, 50 people in that committee, this and that, we have the room, lunch is coming up, whatever. Where are they going to eat? What are the chairs? What's it like? All those things. I think by just walking through every aspect of your conference and trying with your team to think about all the aspects that are relevant at each moment in detail. And so in like programming or development, we talk about the user journey, right? You think about, what is the user, the person who's going through it feeling at that very moment? What might he be needing or missing? What can I provide them at that point? So by just going through that list, you make a big step already. And as you mentioned, make lists. And one of the best organizational things for events that I've ever seen or learned is the idea of having a very elaborate spreadsheet with exact timings. What is happening at what time? Who's going to be where, doing what, and responsible of which aspect? And that's going to it's not going to make you bulletproof, because I think it's just really impossible, nearly impossible to be bulletproof at any event. It's like, I don't know, there's always a tank standing there that's coming at you, but you can put more and more layers of armor. And the more layers of armor you put,
100%.
the more likely you are to be safe behind whatever bunker you're
100%.
hiding in. With that analogy in the bag, chairing. And I've literally, a few days ago, a faculty advisor wrote me and was like, Alex, I have a committee here and there's one delegate dominating everything. She's talking nonsense and the chairs aren't doing anything about it. What can I do? And I'm telling her, look, try to get the organizers to talk to the chairs, but otherwise, what can we do? And she's like, we talked to the chairs. They hadn't talked to the chairs, but it's just hopeless. How can we avoid situations like that, Andrea? You mentioned ineffective chairing also as a point of yours.
Yeah, ineffective chairing, I usually see it as you need to know how to manage committee. You need to know how to manage delegates. If something happens in the committee inside the room, if someone is very disruptive, if someone is bothering someone else, sending inappropriate notes to someone else. But also, as you mentioned, Alex, know what's going on in your committee. Keep track of what's going on, so you can have an actual, base or record that you can show later if, faculty advisor approaches you and says what you just mentioned, like, oh, my delegate hasn't spoken yet, or oh, I saw that, 10 minutes ago, the committee was making so much noise that the other committees were not concentrating. That's what I was referring when I said ineffective chairing. For organizers, this is really important because you need to train your chairs. You need to, not mandatory, but you need to at least 2 weeks before the conference have at least 2 or 3 calls with all your staff, or divided by, committees, or divided by sections, however you want to do it. But you at least need to have a brief call where you say, like, okay, this is what's going on. This is what you need to do when this happens, when you call decorum, when a delegate is being disrupted. This is the person you need to call if, I don't know, a delegate faints. you need to train your chairs for those kind of situations and how to, of course, handle faculty advisors, how to handle delegates, and also, keep it down low, keep it concentrated, keep it, effectively running those committees,
Yeah, I know it's so difficult, and especially as an organizer, you're busy. But I think this is a whole podcast for itself about how, as an organizer, you can prepare your chairs and your committees accordingly. Because I think I've never seen a conference where there's not been at least one committee where it's been an utter disaster. And it's hard to pinpoint the fault, but at the end of the day, the buck stops with the organizers, right? So even though you might be like, oh, but it's the chair's fault. Well, you got the chairs onto the job, and you put them into that place, into that situation. So it's your responsibility to make sure they're doing what you 100%. Want them to do. I think 100%. This is a podcast all of its own, but there's two things I think that are interesting here, maybe. And so for the chairing aspect, again, this is one of the reasons why we built mymun command. And this goes both for the organizer side, but also for the delegate side. So this idea that, as a chair, but I'm so busy, I have to manage my incoming documents, I have to manage my chat, I have to manage my Facebook group, I have to manage my WhatsApp chat, I have to manage my timers, I have to manage my statistics in Excel.
Yeah, with
I have to manage
10 tabs open in your computer,
I have to manage my
papers
Google
on your desk. Yeah.
I have to manage my speakers list.
It's a nightmare.
No, it's so overwhelming. How am I supposed to take care of my delegates' personal needs? I can't. Well, that's exactly why we built an mymun command. So you as a chair can focus on being that mentor, on really providing an extraordinary experience to delegates, and that you have this one tool that does it all for you, essentially, that makes sure you have everything in one place. The document requests coming in from the delegates, the document sharing all in one place, the speakers lists it all in one place, the statistics all in one place, so you don't have to manually track whoever has spoken how many times. And that's just going to allow you as a chair to have this sort of freedom, let's say mentally speaking, in your head as well, to think about, which delegate should I talk to individually to really get them on the right track here. Again, I think we should talk about this in more detail in a separate podcast. But I think all the points we talked about so far, you might be sitting there as organizer. Oh, yeah, it's nice and fine for you to sit there on your high horse and think about how we should organize things and with all the benefit of hindsight, how everything should be done. But I'm busy, I have to study, everybody's a volunteer. Yeah, this is all nice and fine, but how can I realize it? And yes, time is a massive constraint when you organize a conference, isn't it? And we've all been there. And once again, just like the chairs have a hard time being truly good mentors for individual delegates, you have a hard time taking care of all those details, because it takes time to assign people to manage applications, to check who's paid, who hasn't paid, manage emails, inbound, outbound, this and that. I'm just saying words at this point. But the idea, again, of mymun is the way mymun command is kind of for the chairs, that thing that helps you manage everything. mymun is there for you to do that. So you can save hours and hours and hours in assignments. You can save hours in checking payments. You can save hours in having a solid application platform, in clear communication with delegates, because you don't have to answer hours and hours of emails anymore. And you can spend this time that you're saving there on planning all of those things that we talked about in the last little while. I guess that's it.
No, 100%. And regardless of mymun or any platform you use, time is essential. You need to start preparing and you need to start doing checklist or however you want to organize, but you need time. So you don't start, overwhelmingly organizing everything 2 weeks before, or, having little mistakes that could have been prevented if you had the time way before.
Yeah. And I think this starts to tie into one of sort of the additional points that I wrote down here that are sort of less on like a detailed organizing side, but time effectively, because the vast majority of people organizing MUNs are volunteers, right? So time is just a
Indeed.
function of motivation, in a sense. How much time do you want to have or as part of an organizing team? And this is where oftentimes, especially people in charge, let's say the secretary generals, the director generals of conferences, they do not prioritize their team. And sometimes you feel like, I have so much to do, let's get cracking. And you stop going out with your team for drinks. You stop consciously having those sort of team building exercises, going for a run, or I don't know, if you live by a lake, go do a paddle session or something, hang out by the lake, do something, go skiing together if you live in the mountains, although that's going to apply to very few people. Do something with your team, because that motivation, that feeling of being in there together with those people, I think is going to be in the end what keeps people motivated, and which is going to make sure that people actually end up doing the stuff that's necessary, right?
Exactly. No, yeah. I've hosted, or I've been part of many conferences that, do, I don't know, maybe monthly activities. We set up a call, we play games online, or we just talk about life. And also we have like workshops together. We used to have playlists to work remotely, but we worked on our own like space, time, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But we had that playlist that kind of unified us, and we set up like all of our favorite tracks to work there. And that's like one of the things you can do to engage even more your staff, and to create that sense of like a little family.
Absolutely.
Over the next few months, because you're going to be working with them in a very stressful period of time, those 2, 3, 4 days of conference, that
Mm-hmm.
you need to have their reliance, and you need to have that trust in them. So you have that kind of connection, and you can carry out this conference the best you can, basically.
Yeah, it's so important that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see that. I see that one of the things you also noted down, Alex, was do stuff. And with do stuff, what does that exactly mean? Does that mean like, preparing beforehand, do checklist, making decisions? What does that entitle?
It means run around like a headless chicken. No, it doesn't mean that. It means do stuff, because oftentimes within your clubs, societies, you do everything together. You make every decision together, and that has benefits, but it also means everything takes time. And sometimes, especially when it comes to decision making or writing emails, or anything that you effectively do as an organizer, deciding on what kind of food, the more you coordinate it with people, the longer it takes you to make a decision, the more annoying the process is for people, and the less you effectively get done, and the more you're occupied just with trying to make a decision instead of actually thinking about and planning stuff. So what I would just encourage you to do, that sometimes, just getting it out there is
so no procrastination.
Is more important than having the perfect, solution by the end of it. And again, this is also something that sort of ties into this other point I mentioned here. It's no budgeting. And I think every conference budgets to some extent, but many conferences, and this goes more into the smaller conferences, right? But their budget often is like existent, and then by the end of it, they see whether they made a profit or loss. And this is something as an organizer that, especially having not done it properly myself when I organized the conference, is plan your budget in advance. I think there can be a whole podcast again dedicated to that, about how to budget for a conference. But to think about how many people can I realistically expect? How much money am I going to need? What is the delegate fee based on that? And then okay, this is how many delegates I need to make sure I get in applications in order to not, lose money. So this is something I think to absolutely keep in mind. Do you have any experience with that?
I have no experience at all, but I had experience. I was a president of the student body council, so I did a little bit of budgeting. But what I want to say, this also ties into the to kind of the feedback and like the evaluation part of the conference. You can always do a little like report, even on Excel, even like on a
Yeah.
Google Docs, that records everything that you did or the expenses of your last conference. And that
Yeah.
that document, you can transmit it later on to the next team. So they already have an idea of what to expect with how many delegates they were working with, like how they managed the money, how they managed every little section that needs, funding. So that's something to take into account too. You need to kind of have like a report of what you paid for during the
Yeah.
conference, so that the next team can have an idea of what to expect.
Absolutely. I think documenting this is really, really important. And on the other hand, if you have a decent budget, if you allocate certain amounts of money beforehand to certain aspects of your conference, and those people in charge of those aspects can also be much more autonomous in making decisions. Which caterer am I going to go with? What is my requirements? Okay, I need lunch on 3 days. I need to pay for it. And then this is the budget I have for it. And then you can figure it out. And that also saves you from having to make every single decision together. Do we have money for this? I don't know. Okay, let's assume I do. You have to run to your finance officer to get the money. Maybe yes, maybe no. It just makes life a lot easier. And obviously, as you're making a budget, always calculate €1 per day, a user per day for your delegate. Get delegates for a mymun command. Okay, so this is the last one. Again, this is one that applies largely to conferences that don't have like a quite as robust of a documented history, let's say, and a poor internal documentation. It's timeline management. Thinking, setting that conference date effectively right after the last one is over, or beforehand even, so you can communicate it at your closing ceremony. Setting the date for the next conference. Setting the application dates as early as possible. The longer the application dates normally, the more delegates you get. I think, okay, this only applies to some extent, but often, we see people on mymun having applications open for 1-2 months for delegates, and that is a short time frame. This means only people who find you in those 2 months can apply, right? And you're likely going to get people looking after conferences or for conference or even for your conference much before that already. So the longer you can have those periods, the better. So it's setting the dates, communicating them clearly on your website, registering your conference on mymun so people can find it. And then also, I think we talked about it earlier, communicating the schedule and time is something that, like, having this clear communication timeline of what you have to tell people when, it's so important.
100%.
Okay,
I
feel like
more.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's always good that you ought to do is get out of your own organizer head and bubble and think at any point about what are your participants, your delegates, your chairs, what are they seeing, experiencing as they're applying or being at your conference. And if you manage to get into that perspective, I think you will uncover a lot of little points and dots that allow you to avoid making a lot of the mistakes that many feel before you have made already.
Yeah, I mean, you need to also, look at your conference from the delegate's perspective. You're organizing your conference for the delegates. You need to think about what they could expect, what they could need, what they could want, and, organize your conference towards that idea of the delegate is always right, in that way of like the client is always right. Your priority is the delegate. That's the person that's paying to go. That's the person that will want to attend later on in next in iterations. So you need to really think of what the delegate is expecting of your conference.
Awesome. Andrea, did we miss anything? Is there anything that came into your mind over the last 45 minutes, or should we wrap it up?
I think we should wrap it up, but of course, if someone, an organizer watching has any other mistakes that they have made themselves or seen others make, they should totally communicate it to us,
Absolutely. Email to info@mymun.com or just a DM on Instagram. And we're always excited to hear from you and maybe do a version 2 of this soon with some more input from the community even. I think that was such a packed 45 minutes. Andrea, thank you so much for sharing your insights and experience with us and everybody listening or watching. Actually, I would say we're gonna hear each other at the next podcast, and together, as always, we're excited to debate. You don't know this one yet. Together, we're excited to debate better. Awesome. All right. See you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Alex. Thank you for having me. I have a guest here to say goodbye.
Oh, Toulouse. Hello, Toulouse. Goodbye,
my
Toulouse.
Little dog.
Woof, woof.
Well, thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed it. And yeah, see you in the next one, right?
Peace out.